Cosmic Adventures of Captain Hob by Cameron James Drury. Narrated by Cameron James Drury. Chapter 1. Operation Cherry Pie. It was an absolutely delightful Saturday morning. The kind of day with skies as blue as blueberries and clouds as white and fluffy as cotton balls. A light, cool breeze swept across green acres as the glittering sun beamed down a perfect 82 degrees on the earthlings inhabiting Fairview, a quaint and quiet American suburb. Birds chirped merrily in lush magnolia trees, while plump squirrels frolicked throughout the greenery with uncoordinated spasms. Bugs were eaten by giant toads, regurgitated, and thoughtlessly consumed again. Dogs strained at their leashes to chase a very portly mailman walking by, whose legs moved faster than one might expect. All seemed proper and fitting to Freddie Crockett on this picturesque day as he sat on his wide front porch, finishing the last few sips of his morning cup of joe. He proudly surveyed his rather ordinary square yard, lined by an iconic white picket fence and dotted with square, stoic shrubs. Freddie was a tall, slender gentleman with a fine mustache who worked at the downtown library. He was known about town as being a bit peculiar, but although he was unimposing and awkward, he somehow held a certain charm which made up for any lack of social grace. His blue, deep-set eyes communicated a distinct melancholy and weariness, which was seldom noticed due to his light-hearted and optimistic outlook on the walk of life. As the town's rotund mailman neared Freddie's conventional and rather residential mailbox, he paused for a short moment to catch his breath. The man worked up a daily sweat, avoiding the neighborhood's hefty canine population. His labored, squealing breathing was audible from where Freddie sat, causing the librarian to chuckle unabashedly. "Morning, Doug. Fine day, huh? Just feel that breeze, baby." Doug the mailman curtly closed the lid of the mailbox, which he had just stuffed full of worthless ads, peering at Freddie with beady, unamused eyes. He loathed interacting with the humans on his mail route, although he didn't mind Freddie too much. Freddie was an okay guy, though a little eccentric. The most important point in his favor was that he didn't own dogs. "A fine day indeed," Doug grunted. "It'd be a whole lot finer if these critters would just mind their business and leave me alone." Freddie chuckled again. All of Fairview knew that Doug had developed a strong dislike for animals since he began delivering mail many years ago, due to the unfortunate fact that dogs seemed to love chasing his bowling pin-shaped body down the road for sport. "Don't pay the critters any mind, Doug. They're not all bad. My ferret, for example, he's the best man a pal could have. He is going to do great and incredible things one day, mark my words." Now it was Doug's turn to chuckle. Freddie never ceased to sing the praises of his mighty little ferret to anyone with a pulse, and the mailmen of Fairview had all heard more than their share. "Speaking of my ferret, I think I'll go check on him. He's probably still sleeping though. Did you know that ferrets sleep for 75% of their lives?" Freddie began to head inside, but not before pumping his thin, bony fist in the air and saying, "Have a swell day, Doug. You show those dogs who's the best mailman in Fairview." Doug scoffed, resuming a shuffle towards the identical mailbox next door. The best mailman in Fairview was not much of an accolade. Incidentally, the other two mailmen in town, Evan and Christopher, suffered from consistent and devastating bowel movements, which caused them to deliver their mail late on a near daily basis. Doug theorized that this was likely caused by the decision of the postmaster to buy the cheapest and worst coffee on the market in order to have more funds to buy sprinkled donuts. Doug, who was not a regular coffee drinker, was spared from this horror. As Freddie strode inside, he waved to a passing neighbor, whose dog was barking excitedly, already zeroing in on Doug's large rump as it waddled down the sunny sidewalk. The smell of a baking cherry pie filled Freddie's long, pointed nose as he passed through the shabby chic kitchen to the winding staircase, kissing his beloved wife Margaret on the way. "Smells amazing, sweetheart. I'll be right back. Going to go check on my boy," Freddie said, already salivating. "Sounds good, dear." "It'll be done in just a few minutes," responded Margaret, straightening up and smiling with her wide, trademark smile. She was a tall woman of stately stature and fiery red hair, which seemed at odds with her rather modest and subdued personality. The Crockett's house had an old-world charm to it, the architecture a unique mix of Victorian and colonial. Delicate china statues and curios lined the cedar shelves, with the occasional, absurd ferret-related item attempting to blend into the otherwise conventional aesthetic. Freddie exuberantly trotted up the stairs in eager expectation for the high point of his morning, inwardly wondering whether his ferret had already awoken from his daily 18-hour slumber. At the top of the stairs, Freddie turned down a bright, sunlit hallway to a room directly at the end. The door to the room was adorned by a fancy little nameplate, which was inscribed Mr. Wigglesworth. This was the name of Freddie's esteemed little ferret, a name which was amusing to Freddie in that his ferret did wiggle around quite a bit, and secondly, that to Freddie, his ferret was of infinite worth. A noble name for a noble creature, Freddie thought with satisfaction. He slowly pushed open the door with a creak, peeking in the direction of Wigglesworth's cage. He hoped to see that absurd, ridiculous-looking specimen bouncing up and down, left to right, with his little arms waving in the air and his tongue sticking out, squeaking like a fat rat. This was indeed the glorious sight that greeted Freddie as he entered the circus-themed room, grinning wide as a Montana blue sky. The morning sun illuminated Wigglesworth's den, which was littered with dolls, play toys, and mysterious objects hidden under furniture. "Good morning there, Mr. Wigglesworth, and how are we doing this fine day?" Freddie asked enthusiastically. Wigglesworth's response was a loud squeak, accompanied by an acrobatic leap off his top-level balcony onto the other side of the cage, which culminated with a clumsy fall into his own litter pan. Freddie let out a jolly, full-bellied laugh, hardly able to stand how endearing his ferret was. Oh. After catching his breath, Freddie called in a sing-song fashion, "It's time to take you out of that cage and let you have some free time. You love your freedom, don't you, pal?" Mr. Wigglesworth stared up at Freddie intently, as though trying to decode his words into ferret speak. He was a rather large ferret, not plump or rotund, but a clear alpha male. He was fetching in an off-white coat, with a long streak down his back and a dark circle around his right eye, which gave him the appearance of a bandit or pirate. His stance was one of barely suppressed energy, while his attitude suggested an eagerness to exercise mischief and domination. The cage where Mr. Wigglesworth dwelt was a labyrinth of 4 stories, connected by vertical passages. It was filled with hanging toys, shredded beyond recognition, and cuts of meat from Billy Willie the butcher from down the street. This was appropriate, since ferrets are vicious and cute little carnivores after all. There was even a regal and extravagant bed on the top-level balcony where Mr. Wigglesworth often slept in, with a neatly sketched, tiny portrait of the ferret as an aristocrat, which Freddie had commissioned specially by a local painter. Freddie now impatiently opened up the cage door like a child on Christmas Day, reaching in and gently grabbing his hefty ferret with both hands. Before Freddie was even able to remove the beast from its lair, the mischievous bandit wriggled out of his limp hands and plopped down onto the floor below with a compact thud. He scurried over to the nearest corner and turned to give Freddie a challenging look that clearly read, "Come try to catch me, you strange man." Freddie laughed admiringly at his ferret's rebellious attitude, as well as his aptitude to evade and escape. He opened a nearby cabinet, which was filled with dozens of plushy toys ranging from otters to gorillas. Freddie pondered what poor plushie would be eviscerated by the sharp, knife-like claws that Wigglesworth was packing. His hands moved over each plushie with the gaze of an unsympathetic executioner. The unfortunate victim sentenced was a stuffed lizard toy, whose size and proportions closely matched to Mr. Wigglesworth's. As soon as Freddie removed the poor plushie and crouched onto the ground, Wigglesworth's little paws began to scramble rapidly, propelling his long, absurdly shaped body across the wooden floor and over to his owner as fast as possible. His eyes were narrowed, his little snout drawn back, totally focused on annihilating the lizard toy. Chuckling merrily at his ferret's predatory nature, Freddie launched the plushie into the air and watched excitedly as Wigglesworth braced his front legs, buried his tiny teeth, and diverted all power to his hind legs. The ferret's long body launched into the air as his little tongue waved and his little arms flailed, set on a direct collision course with the doomed reptile. Wigglesworth's eyes widened as he reached his target. With a satisfied growl, in a single motion, in midair, he snapped the head of the plushie clean off. Oh, holy sausage patties! That was swell, my little friend. I would not want to mess with you. What a fearsome creature thou art. Oh, you're too funny. While Freddy slapped his knees and clapped wildly, quite beside himself at his pet's prowess, Wigglesworth fixed his sight on the long string attached to the attic door. Hopping and grumbling in frustration, the little bandit attempted to reach the tempting knob which hung far out of reach. Freddy paused to take a breath and said jovially, "You'll never be able to reach that, my boy. You're an earthbound creature, despite your unusual aptitude for flying." While this was all occurring, Margaret was downstairs putting the finishing touches on her famous cherry pie. As she was brushing egg yolk over the top of the pie crust, Freddy dropped laughingly to the ground over the plushie incident, causing a loud thump to echo throughout the house, and Margaret to spill the bowl of egg yolk all over her white sundress. As poor Margaret began to huff and puff agitatedly, Freddy loudly descended the staircase with Wigglesworth in his arms, still chuckling merrily. When he saw the blotches of yellow on Margaret's sundress, he looked at his wife questioningly, his mouth still stretched into a wide grin. "Frederick, you caused quite a startle in me. Look at my dress. Now I'll have to wear something else to the Oswalds." The Oswalds were dear friends of the Crockett's, and it was a long-standing tradition for Margaret to bake her famous cherry pie for dinner at the Oswalds' cottage. Her pie was also a favorite of Wigglesworth, and before Freddy could even respond to his wife, the mischievous ferret had swiftly escaped the arms of his owner, eyes lusting after the cherry pie. Wigglesworth pivoted off of Freddy's chest with all four little paws as he transitioned into a graceful, spinning glide through the air, attempting to rocket straight into the cherry-filled center of the southern delicacy. Bullseye! Wigglesworth intercepted the glorious, crusty mountain of sugar and cherry delight, crashing into the moist center in a show of unbridled ambition and daring. Margaret let out a scream so loud that Freddy jumped in fright, covering his ears. Wigglesworth had acted so quickly that his owner's mostly absent mind had failed to comprehend the surreal, aerial acrobatics that his pet had just performed. After quickly devouring a quarter of the pie in just a matter of seconds, the ferret proceeded to sit upright on his hind legs within the ruined dessert, locking his beady black eyes with Margaret's now tear-filled eyes, as if to say, "What you gonna do about it, hun?" Cherry at this point had further illustrated a tapestry of disaster on the canvas of Margaret's sundress. "Wigglesworth! No, my boy, don't eat that! It'll make you sick!" Freddy hurried wordly to his beloved pet, working to pry open Wigglesworth's clenched jaws. "Frederick Crockett, this is just about the last straw. I've had enough of your little smelly vandal. His constant attempts to fly, eat our food, and cause destruction has me going bonkers." Freddy desperately sought to hold on to his furiously wriggling ferret while pacifying his distraught wife. Wait, my love, let's just enjoy this beautiful day. Don't let little Wigglesworth's escapades get you down. I apologize, dearest. Let me buy you a new and even nicer dress from the boutique downtown to make up for everything. You just relax. I'll clean up the mess." Margaret pursed her lips but took a deep breath and composed herself, nodding silently. She was used to her husband's lenient attitude towards his ferret, but some days it was just too much to bear. She did appreciate the apology, however, and decided to drop the matter and move on with her day. Margaret was a gentle soul who loved her husband very much, but she was not afraid to speak her mind. She too had a certain weariness present in her eyes like Freddy, born of things past. She knew that sometimes it's better to let things go, because life is short. "Apology accepted, dear. Just take him upstairs before I change my mind and ask you to be rid of him." Heeding her words, Freddy quickly made his escape from the kitchen with Wigglesworth, who continued to glare at Margaret with dark, scheming little eyes. Freddy made a march of shame up the wooden staircase, brainstorming how to lift the spirits of his wife as soon as possible. He entered Wigglesworth's room once more gently placing his cat snake back into his cage. He didn't have the heart to scold the little creature for his outrageous behavior. Wigglesworth slowly wiggled out of Freddy's hands and over to his water tray, shaking off the last remnants of the delectable yet poisonous human food. "It's all right, Mr. Wigglesworth. You only acted according to your nature after all. Don't worry about Mom. She'll come around. Get some sleep, my boy. Dream of the stars, buddy." Wigglesworth crawled into his perfectly sized ferret bed and contentedly fell asleep, satisfied by his morning of excitement. Freddy shook his head slowly, stroked his fine mustache, and headed downstairs to grab his hat and pea coat. The question of which dress to buy his wife now occupying his mind. Upon opening the front door, the pleasant sight of merry children playing in the neighboring yard as leaves swayed in the cool breeze brought a strange smile upon Freddy's weathered face, reminding him of days past. What Freddy failed to realize was that when closing the gate to Wigglesworth's abode moments ago, in his distracted frame of mind, he only managed to latch it halfway.